Swing my hammer, hands are working on, we're working on a dream. Pastor Shepherd's on the singing mood today. Working on a dream. Da 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 da. I'm working on a dream, Chuck.
Yep.
Chuck the engineer, Dr. Nelson, on the Wake Up program on WIDU. Have I woken you up with my wonderful singing? Pastor Dennis Shepherd at United Methodist Church in Hope Mills, North Carolina.
I'm here.
Home of the dry dam.
Yes.
And your government at its finest.
Yeah.
When's that dam going to get fixed?
I don't know, but they claim they're going to be working on it soon. Now we got everything settled.
That famous last words. You heard it here on WIDU, the exclusive. The dam will be filled one day. Kids will be able to play in the water, and ducks will be able to swim, and fish shall swim. There shall be water in the Hope Mills Dam one day when politicians and engineers and dam constructors together can get it right. Tuesdays with Dr. T on the Wake Up program. I'm Dr. Nelson, your favorite neighborhood chiropractor at Nelson & Nelson Chiropractic Centers. And today we have a very special guest. He is our crack reporter from New Brunswick, Brunswick County that is in the studio. And we often go to him because he is our expert extraordinaire with regards to the American working unions in this country. Mm-hmm. Are unions alive and well? The answer is no. We will find out more about this. But my in-studio guest is Ron Floor. He is a union worker with the electricians union out of New Jersey, and we often go to him to talk about the American worker. You know, we've talked about this on this program, about how the American worker is continuing to take it on the chin. There are no more rights for American workers. 90% of all the jobs in this country, new jobs, are in the service industry. That's right. Mom and dad are working both in the service industry, and the good jobs, I don't have to tell you, the good jobs that used to be union-paying jobs in this country at $20 and $30 and $40 an hour, steel worker unions, teachers unions, electrical unions, auto manufacturing unions. What built this country is off the backs of the great American workers. And the American workers have been taking it on the chin for the last 40 years, and unions have been the blame. They've been getting the blame instead of getting the praise. And as workers lose their rights, more and more you hear about workers unable to fight back. Just recently, McDonald workers went on strike, were picketing because they're making $8 an hour, and they feel that these jobs are jobs that need to improve as far as wages. That's why the talk of increasing the minimum wage is on the table. But really, let's get
$15 an hour.
But let's get to the heart of the matter, Pastor Shepherd. Mm-hmm. What built this great country of ours? What built the steel? What built the bricks? What built the mortar? What built the masons? What built this country? It's hard American workers,
laborers
that were building the middle class in this country.
Absolutely.
And the middle class has shrunk in 40 years. There's a fine line between poor and rich in this country. It doesn't take much. The average American is down 40% in his net worth due to the tricksters in Wall Street and the banks in 2008. Most of the American workers in this country are now working 2 jobs to support a family. So let's talk to the guests. Let's get it from the horse's mouth. The first thing we want to do is introduce Ron Floor. Welcome to the show.
Good morning.
Now, Ron, first off, tell me how you got involved in the unions.
Well, after high school, I went to community college. Didn't really work for me. Talked to my parents. Decided to go out of state to Florida, to university. Mm-hmm. That didn't go too well for me.
Don't turn your
head.
So
my father suggested I apply for the electrical union. So went back up to New Jersey, applied along with 700 other people that applied. Mm-hmm. Initially, you had to take an aptitude test, put the round peg in the round hole, square peg, square hole.
Right.
And after you passed that, you had to go for an oral interview in front of a combination of the union members and the contractors that you would be working for. I passed the interview, so they accepted 7 of us. Out of the 700 that applied, they took seven of us.
7 people. Wow. Now, what was the training involved? In other words, tell me the difference between what the union offers you as far as training initially. You had to go through extensive training to be an electrician, right?
5 years of an apprenticeship.
5 years of an apprenticeship.
One night a week, September through May. The class was 3 hours. Electrical theory, transformers, motors. So we had training. We were trained by journeymen that are in the field. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And tell me, did you follow somebody on the job? Or?
As an apprentice, you're required to work with a journeyman. You couldn't work by yourself with another apprentice unless you were going to get coffee for a coffee break. But we got our training. Our hands-on training was with another journeyman that had years of experience.
Right. Now, the criticism about unions is that unions take the workers' fees and the weak workers' dues, and unions use that money, in political circles, sometimes not in agreement with their workers. And unfortunately, unions, have these specific requirements that cause people that hire union workers to pay more money for jobs. Well, explain to me the argument about union workers and why. Why that's just not so.
Well, first of all, you're required to pay about, for my local. A local is a certain area in the state of New Jersey. Mine was Monmouth and Ocean counties along the Jersey Shore. Another local could be Jersey City, Newark, Atlantic City. Our local was very small. We didn't have much industry like the casinos or the refineries.
Right.
But we're all required to pay a monthly dues. Monthly dues is about $35 a month, whether you're working or not.
Right.
When you go to work, they take out an assessment, which is about 2% of your gross. That goes back to the union hall. That pays for the mortgage.
We're going to take a break and we'll be right back on the Wake Up program.
Oh, I've seen fire and I've seen rain. I've seen sunny days that I thought would never end. I've seen lonely times when I could not find a friend. But I always thought that I'd see you again.
Hi, Dr. Nelson at Nelson & Nelson Chiropractic Centers. Why are we so involved in high school football? You see, it was 30 years ago that my high school football coach's best friend was a chiropractor. A few of the guys on the team had some problems. We went to the chiropractor, and guess what? We got better. That's why I understand how important high school athletics are and how important chiropractic is to that formula. Nelson & Nelson Chiropractic Centers working overtime to make a difference in our community.
That
Let me
pays
tell you,
for the mortgage on the building, the utilities. It pays for the business manager. The business manager's in there to put you to work. He's out there. He gets a call from a contractor. Let's say they're building a Target. He needs 30 men. His shop has 10 guys. He's got to hire 20 guys out of the union hall.
Right.
So that business manager is responsible to placing you on the job. So when you're paying the assessments, you're paying his salary. And like he had said, money does go into a pack.
Right. But there's also benefits if you're hurt on the job or if you're sick or you.
Well, you have hospitalization. There's
and not, if you're not employed, right? If you're not employed and the union has no work for you, they actually do cover you during those periods where it's slow.
no unemployment.
They don't.
There's
cover
no
you during-
compensation if you're unemployed.
Right.
It's unemployment. Or you could go out and work as a landscaper during the summer, find an odd job. But it's hit or miss. You have to be up 6:30. You got to call the union hall to see how many jobs are available. If you're up on the list, there's a running list. There may be 200 guys on that list. You may be 200. And if there's no work, you're not going out anytime soon.
Right.
Yeah.
So tell me, what do you think? Tell me, what are the differences between a state that is unionized and a state that isn't?
Well, let's talk about the prevailing wage and the right to work state. I was just reading an article about the stimulus money that was put into the economy in 2008. If there is, let's say, a bridge and a union contractor bids on that bridge, it's a prevailing wage. The prevailing wage may be $45 for the electrician, let's say. So it may be $35 in the paycheck, so much into a pension, so much into an annuity, so much into the health care. A non-union contractor can also bid on that job, but he's got to pay his employees the same amount. It has to be equal to the $45 an hour. Now, that non-union contractor may not offer hospitalization or a pension, but he still has to pay that $45 an hour.
Right. Now, the people listening would say, gee whiz, $45 an hour.
I'm just using that as a number.
Well, I'm just saying, they would
Yeah.
say that's outrageous, right?
Yeah.
I mean, how is that possible that I could get paid $45 an hour? But at some point in this country, those jobs were skilled labor jobs. I mean, they were skilled labor. They built the cities. They built the buildings. They built, we know people that are in the welders union, and we know people that are in the electrical union. We know people that are in the plumbers union. I mean, there are certain rights that workers have, and these rights were long, established the hard way, right? Just like the amount of hours you can work, just like the amount of time that an employer can force you to work in certain jobs.
Right.
And it was all to try to sustain the working class and help the working class move into the middle class.
Well, we're about the same age, so back in the 70s when I was growing up, whatever my father's hourly wage was, it was enough. We had a decent life. I played sports. I had new sneakers on my feet, catcher's glove. My mother worked part-time jobs. She worked around the school schedule to make sure we were at the bus stop. Then she would go fill in at a doctor's office or something like that. But my father was the main breadwinner.
Right.
And he's retired now. He's retired.
Right. And he has a pension that he paid into, and he has health benefits he paid into.
Right. Now, again, this is a private union, a labor union. Unlike the public unions, teachers, firefighters, they are getting paid by the taxpayers' dollars.
Right.
In essence, we are being paid by the consumer, because if we're building the Target, a Walmart, something like that, it gets trickled down to the consumer that's actually, in a way, paying my salary.
Right. Well, we see it in North Carolina where the teachers union really isn't that strong. I mean, the teachers union really isn't a strong union here in North Carolina. Most of the teachers complain about their salaries. Most of the teachers, are constantly complaining that there's not enough money, in the school system. And there is a big difference between union, states and states without unions with teachers.
Well, it was strong enough, Dr. T, that they got the tenure law passed in North Carolina, which has become a problem in many ways, and they're trying to deal with that. What's the happy solution? How do we protect teachers, but at the same time, how do we deal with incompetency in a reasonable way? For example, I knew a principal who fired a teacher for incompetency, and he went through 3 hearings before this man was finally dismissed. And he had a briefcase full of materials to demonstrate the competency of the individual. But others have not been terminated. They get transferred around to other jobs because they fear a lawsuit and all these issues. Right. And it goes on and on and on.
Well, there has to be a happy medium as well.
Well, it has to be a happy medium way to solve it, but it becomes a problem. John Stossel did a marvelous story some years ago in 2020, and he was looking at the teachers union in New York City. And if you remember, he showed the building where these teachers go every day and play cards and watch television because they're not allowed in a classroom, but they cannot be terminated because of the tenure law.
Right. Well, that's wrong.
Yeah,
I mean, I think Ron would agree that's wrong.
When he aired that story, what happened? They had to hire bodyguards for him, get his family out of New York City because those people marched on the studio and threatened the man's life. Right. Well, they didn't want that exposed.
There has to be a happy medium, and it has to come from, honestly, the responsibility of the employer and what does the employer provide, and that's the difference. Sure if wages are fair, and you could argue what's fair, what's not fair. But the reality is we've seen this slow destruction of the unions, and it's almost like, as the union membership has gone down, the amount of working hours that people have had to work 2 and 3 jobs has gone up, and the amount of benefits and pensions that have gone through just disappeared. They don't exist anymore. Whereas the American worker at one point had a certain future. If they were an electrical union worker, they could know that if they put in their 25 years and worked hard for 25 years and had a decent wage and showed up at work, they had a decent job where they could afford to send their kids off to college.
Sure.
Those things don't exist anymore. I mean, even in our own community. Let's face it. I mean, people still are lining up to get the jobs at Kelly Springfield.
Sure.
And why is it? Because it's the only union-paying job in town. Well, I have a call for workers. They got 500 people lined up out there.
Absolutely. For every job.
So what's the difference? What is the difference between that and lining up to work at CVS, for $7.50 an hour?
Well, my family roots are in textiles, and I remember well when they were trying to unionize the textile plants. My dad worked for J.P. Stevens,
Sally Fields,
which was Norma Ray, and that was based on a plant in Roanoke Rapids. It was a Stevens plant. J.P. Stevens, by the way, was headquartered in New Jersey, but one of the things that they wanted union in there for was to help make the plant safer, and to provide collective bargaining for the employees. And most of the employees were not anti-union per se. A lot of horror stories were told, about what was going to happen with the union and all that kind of stuff, and scared people. But what actually got the union passed in the plant where my dad worked was one afternoon, one of the supervisors leaving the plant ran over one of the union organizers who was handing out leaflets. He actually hit him with his vehicle, put him in the hospital. And of course, he went to jail for that. But that made people think, wait a minute, why are they going to such lengths to stop the union? And they voted it in. That's when it got passed. And, and it was a good thing. But the problem with it is, though, a lot of these guys figured out if they can't work with the union, they shut the plant down. And they reopen it as a non-union plant 6 months from now with a different name. and they got around it that way, and that was a problem too.
Well, doesn't
but
it really
did do some good things for the workers.
It honestly, I mean, it began on good terms with good measures, and it was all about workers' rights. Essentially, started with the truckers. You know, the truckers were the first to unionize, the Teamsters, because of the long hours that truckers were expected to drive.
Before that happened, the farmers had a union when they formed things like the Grange and organizations like that. They were sort of the forerunner of that, and then came along the AFL. The American Federation of Labor, CIO.
And not only, let's not forget the sweat workers in New York, like you said, the textile workers.
Sure.
You're seeing this in countries like in India, where they pack these people into sweatshops making garments to sell at, at some of these stores in our country, and they're packed in there like sardines.
Absolutely.
And then there's a fire, and the whole factory burns down.
Or the chemical plant exploded. Remember the chemical plant exploded?
Absolutely.
And killed I don't know how many thousand people in India.
So really, it boils down to workers' rights and what are the rights of workers in this country. But I mean, it's got to be almost impossible to compete with countries like China and India and Mexico, where how is it even possible to compete? What's going to stop it from? I mean, essentially, I think it's like 5% of workers in this country are unionized. So, I mean, are unions dead, Ron? I mean, is that the end of unions in this country?
Well, like Pastor Shepard said, there's certain situations that have to be corrected when you're talking about the teachers sitting in the break room drinking coffee. I can only speak from the labor, the private union sector. If a guy's not doing his job, the foreman or the shop supervisor sees him sleeping in the corner, he gets fired.
Right.
He goes back to the union.
Exactly right.
Now, do you want to take that chance in this economy when there's 200 guys out of work, that you're going to be out of work for another 6 or 7 months?
Yeah.
Probably not.
Yeah.
But if the guy does go back to work, he goes to another contractor, he gets caught in the same situation, and he gets sent back to the hall again. Eventually, with the way things are going, the contractors are slimming down. There's not as many where you can go and hide. You go out to work today, you are working. Not saying that they never worked.
Right.
We've always worked. Always worked. You're in the ditch, you're out in the winter, outside buildings, ice, snow, rain, every situation like that. But what I'm saying, it's different with the teachers, police officers,
public sector,
public sector.
Nurses
and it has to
York?
be corrected. I do agree. It should be corrected.
Well, but I mean, let's face it, the unions have taken a huge hit. We were in Indiana during the Super Bowl. When was that? 2 years ago?
It was 2 Super Bowls ago.
2 years ago, and the teachers union was...
No, it was the governor signed a bill for a right-to-work state.
Right.
And the labor union showed up in force.
Right.
The IBW, the UA, the fitters, the carpenters, from Illinois, from Chicago, California. They showed up in solidarity.
At the Super Bowl.
And my friend here, Dr. T, was right in the middle trying to give him a high five, and I told him, step to the side because they are not going to slow down. They want to go right up there. We went there. It was historic because we were there for the signing. The governor signed it. And the thing is, to be honest with you, I believe that a very large percentage of the membership of that labor union probably voted that Republican governor into office.
Yes.
Maybe guns. It's a very lot of farmland out there. They're hunting for their food, and that was their priority. And the same thing in Jersey. I've had many fellow brothers, strong NRA members, and I said, it's going to come down. It will come down to hunting for your food or going to be able to afford to go to the store and buy your food.
Well, I can only explain to people from my own personal experience living in New Jersey, where there was a strong teachers union.
Yeah.
Okay. The school I went to had a strong teachers union, and the education, it was just voted 9th in the state, just the school that I attended. But teachers had certain rights, and we're not talking about teachers living, on yachts and vacationing. We're talking about a standard of living that is reasonable. And it's, in New Jersey, it's, the starting salary for a teacher, I believe, is like $45,000. At the end of, 25 years of your career, I think most of those teachers are around the $75,000 to $80,000 a year if they go into administration. Dr. Nelson, we'll be right back. Tuesdays with Dr. T, along with Pastor Dennis Shepard. We'll be right back.
Right back.
Favor Urban Ministry. Our Find a Friend program teaches at-risk youth life skills and character building through mentoring. The Adult Literacy Program matches adult students with personal tutors. Our Nehemiah Project repairs homes for the elderly and low-income homeowners. The Emergency Assistance Program provides food, clothing, and crisis support. All programs are free of charge. You can help us transform lives today. Volunteer or donate. Visit us at www.fayurban.org.
Nelson & Nelson Chiropractic Centers is your first stop following a car accident. No waiting, minimal paperwork, and doctors and staff that put you first. Pick up the phone and call Nelson & Nelson Chiropractic Centers. We don't just say we care for you. We prove it in everything we do. Now, take it away, Debbie.
Nelson & Nelson Chiropractic Centers. We care for you.
$1,000 a year. If they go into administration, principals, in that route, that's
six figures,
over 100,000.
Yeah.
But when you have a family of 4 or a family of 5, and both husband and wife are teachers in New Jersey, there is a certain decent middle class standard of living, and there are health benefits, and there is a pension fund, and a lot of my friends that have taught in those school districts, have retired nicely, not lavishly, but they've had a decent life, and they've enjoyed their work, and they've enjoyed their profession, and that's what it's all about. Now, when you talk to teachers here in North Carolina, you don't get that. I mean, honestly, out of most of the teachers I speak to, they're constantly they're not happy in the environment. They're not happy with the salary. They're not happy with the shortages. They're not happy with their position, and they don't have those rights. They just don't have those rights. So I don't know what the difference is as far as their union, but I'm told that the union is not as strong in North Carolina with the teachers union that is in New Jersey.
Do they even have a union?
I believe they do, but I don't believe it's very strong.
What, a teachers union here in North Carolina?
Absolutely.
And the same goes for police officers and firefighters and state troopers, etc.
Going back to Indiana, when we were there in the March before the Super Bowl, I was talking to a state trooper, and I asked him, are you part of a collective bargaining agreement? Yeah. And this was a state trooper, and he said no. And I just couldn't believe a state trooper
that they don't have
had no representation, and
they don't. And the teachers have the NC, I think it's EA, North Carolina Educators Association, or whatever, but they do have a teachers union here, and. Yeah, you're right. In terms of the impact on the state Congress, they haven't had as much impact as they should have with wages and that kind of thing. So you wonder about how strong they are. But
well, even the pastors have a union, right? I mean, essentially, you have a brotherhood of pastors that collectively work together.
No, there's no union,
but they're not officially unionized. But there are a group of you that work together for. Collective bargaining with regards to what your health plans are and what you can choose and what you want and how you want to choose which plan, right?
We have an insurance committee that presents optional plans, and then the annual conference votes on them to decide, and the representatives from every church there to vote on that.
So you're working as a group as to protect your rights with regards to what your health plan should be.
Correct. Yeah, that's done.
So they are working as a group. I mean, honestly, I know that unions get a bad reputation, but at the same time, I don't know what other rights the American workers have in this country. I mean, I don't know where else you go.
As we've said on this show many times, they've done many, many, many good things that often don't get reported by the media. But it's usually the negative things that get the most publicity, like we know all about the teacher.
Well, what's the reality? Are unions dead?
No, they're not.
What is the percentage of Americans that are unionized?
I thought it was lower than 20%.
Lower than 20. I thought, well, maybe I'm wrong.
20%. I know North Carolina is the lowest number of members in a union.
We're right to work.
As many states are, but North Carolina does have the lowest number as far as members go to a union combined. My advice that I've always taught to people, like even the grocery stores, the deli, they're union members. They have their union, commercial food workers. And I've talked to a few of them, and they weren't happy about their health care coverage. They weren't happy about this, and talking about the bad things about the unions. You elect those officials. You elect the president. My number one advice is go to union meetings. My 5 years as apprenticeship, like I just talked about, we were required. We had to go to the union meetings. We had to know what it was all about. So when it came time for an election, we voted on our benefits. If we got a $1 an hour raise, I always voted to put the majority of it into annuity. I was a single guy, no children, so when I retired, I have that annuity. The guy my age that had 3 children, he wanted to see that dollar go into his paycheck. The older gentlemen, they wanted to see more go into the pension so they could get out a little bit earlier.
Sure.
So, but again, it's your officials that you elect as your president of the union. They're making the decisions for you.
In addition to that, the standards are much higher, right? I mean, you would say the standards for electrical work, there's a certain level of competency and a certain level of acceptance, whether it's construction, commercial, or home construction, or, there's a level of competency that is required when you're doing union work. In other words,
you're being trained. You have to do math. You're doing electrical theory.
What I'm saying to you is
you have to know math. You have to have a math a good grade average going into that.
Yeah.
They want to see your grades.
Right. But it has to do with safety. It has to do
you have
with
OSHA. The unions were, affiliated with OSHA, not affiliated, but they got the OSHA started to protect the workers out there.
Right.
And then painters, they have a union.
Yeah. They do.
The math probably isn't as stringent. You're not mixing white with black to make a certain color and stuff like that, but we're bending conduit, taking measurements all the time. So it is skilled labor. When they talk about skilled labor, that's what it is.
Yeah, it's skilled labor. No question about it. By the way, I know some companies that built plants down here to get away from unions, from Michigan and other states. My brother-in-law worked in a plant back home in Aberdeen, and that plant was based in Holland, Michigan, and it came here to get away from unions. But they had lots and lots of problems in that plant. It was a non-union plant, had lots and lots of problems. And part of it was the way they were trying to run the plant, and the guy that came to do it didn't understand the mindset of people in the South, didn't know how to work with people in the South. And so they had lots of problems. So finally the company came in and reorganized things and allowed the workers who were there to come together for collective bargaining, because they realized if they didn't do something, they were going to vote union in.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing about talking about that was, I think it was Volvo, German automaker,
Jetta,
Volkswagen. I think it was
South
Volvo.
Carolina.
They wanted to build a plant, and the employees down in Tennessee. The management wanted them to organize because their relationship in Europe was very positive. They worked together. They had a good relationship with the unions in Europe, and they tried to pursue it, and the membership down there voted it down. The members down there in Tennessee, they voted it down.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of misunderstanding in regards to unions. Their intent was good, to protect the American workers, to have standards, safety standards, where workers were getting paid for overtime. That was one of the things the unions did.
Yeah.
And those things protected the American workers, built the middle class in this country. And if you ask many people today, the middle class is gone, and it's shrinking, and you've got a big divide. What people consider middle class these days was not middle class 20 years ago. I'm Dr. Nelson. We're discussing unions, and we're on WIDU, the Wake Up program, with Pastor Shepard. Our guest is Ron Floor. He is a union worker. Look for the union label when you are buying union clothes. Remember that song?
All that.
We're going to take a break, and we'll be right back on the Wake Up program.
Sunny days that I thought would never end. I've seen lonely times when I could not find a friend. But I always thought that I'd see you again.
Hi, Dr. Nelson at Nelson & Nelson Chiropractic Centers. Why are we so involved in high school football? You see, it was 30 years ago that my high school football coach's best friend was a chiropractor. A few of the guys on the team had some problems. We went to the chiropractor, and guess what? We got better. That's why I understand how important high school athletics are and how important chiropractic is to that formula. Nelson & Nelson Chiropractic Centers working overtime to make a difference in our community.
WIDU.com on the internets, as one president called them. Yeah. And also on Time Warner Cable, Channel 60, every night from 7:30 to 9. We have 3 shows a night, airing 7 nights a week, starring Pastor Shepard and myself. So check it out on Time Warner Cable, Channel 60. And in my studio today is the one and only Ron Floor from New Jersey, the Electrical Union. And we're talking about unions in this country, and we just looked it up on the internets, and we found out that 11.3% of the workforce in this country are unionized. And we also found out that only 155 million laborers in this country. Think about that. We have 300 million Americans, 100 of them are elderly and children, 100 million, and 155 are working in the labor force. So that is a lot of, we talked about this in the past, that is a lot, it's not a lot of people that have to raise a whole heck of a lot of money to pay for things in this country. And
absolutely.
One of those things, are health care and Medicare and Social Security and Medicaid. So these are other issues that we're not going to talk about tonight. But what about the unions, and what about their ability to help the American workers? How are we going to compete globally, how can we compete, Ron? If a union worker in New Jersey is making $45 an hour as an electrician, and in Bangladesh he's making a nickel and a half, how can we compete?
Well, you're talking about manufacturing. We're talking about construction. They're not going to build a Target and ship it over here.
How about they build the walls and ship those over here? How about they run the conduits?
They prefabbed.
Or how about the materials that union workers work with? How about those materials produced? I mean, at some point, the cost of that is it's got to be affected, and it's got to affect the unions at some point.
The only way we're going to be able to effectively compete, in my opinion, is that people in America have to demand American made. You know, I'm at the point now when I'm buying things, I look to see if it's made in America.
And is that possible?
Not entirely, but there are more things made in America than we realize. Mm-hmm. You know,
there's a list out there. If you go to a union site, an AFL-CIO site, they'll have a list.
Absolutely.
Of what's made in America. I know during the holidays, Thanksgiving, Christmas, I see it out there.
Sure.
Maybe Ocean Spray, Cranberry.
But is that not a solution? Do you think anybody in this country is really going to?
Well, Pastor Shepard just said that he's looking. I've been looking since 1990. Once I got into the union, like I said, going to the union means we had a sign in front of our union hall forever, for the longest time. Like I said, I got in about 1990, and it was a big wood sign that was painted, and it had a shark biting a Honda. And it said, no foreign vehicles in our parking lot. And we had a massive property, a large union hall with a large parking lot. Anybody that had a foreign vehicle, Honda, Toyota, they had to park it out on the highway. Since probably about 7-8 years now, they have done away with that sign.
Right.
But, but as people are driving, it was right on the highway, a major artery through New Jersey from Trenton to the beach. Right. So anybody that was going to the beach, they seen that sign. Right. They probably thought we were lunatics. Right. Yeah. But it brought a point across.
Well, police officers and firefighters and those and civil service, public sector, those jobs. It depends on where you live, but certainly in the cities, I was explaining to you that my cousin was a New York City cop for 25 years. Started when he was 20, put in a lot of years and a lot of hours over the years, and risk of his life almost on a daily basis in some of the worst neighborhoods in New York. And 25 hard years, which is probably equivalent to 50 total years anywhere else. And he had a union, and he was paid. Some could say fairly for the work he put in. He retired at 50. And has a pension that that's paid through the union after paying his dues, and he has health care benefits, and he has like 60% of his starting salary or 70% of his starting salary for for the rest of his life. So that sort of dedication and that sort of commitment, was there for 25 years of service, and in a very good police force in New York City. But, again, he's not living like, Rockefeller. I mean, it was a decent pay for a decent job of work. And I guarantee you the only reason was because it was a union. The police officers union in New York City is very strong.
And the other thing the union does for those guys is union helps them when they have problems, when complaints are filed or something like that. Right. They got a union rep. If you don't have that, you're on your own. You hire your own lawyer and everything.
And you can talk to officers locally, and they'll tell you that the starting pay for a favorable police officer is not very much money to risk your life, and they have to work 30 years in order to retire.
Well, I talked to some of my friends. I talked to some of my friends that I grew up with in the 70s and 80s, and their fathers did construction, electrical. Right. They weren't their own contractors. They worked for somebody. Right. They did it for their whole lives. Talking to him now on Facebook, hey, how's your dad doing? He's still working. Still working. Probably the house is paid off. Probably. I don't know. But thank goodness for his Social Security and his Medicare. The contractors they work for, whether it was a painter, a carpenter, electrical, they really, not all of them have the benefits that my father has. Yeah. My father has a nice house in Toms River, New Jersey, paying taxes up to butt. Yeah. He has a little tiny condo down in Myrtle Beach, saved for.
But he worked 40 years.
He worked 40 years. He worked 40, and he was one of the lucky ones. He worked for about 25 years straight for a contractor. Like I said, contractors don't like you if they don't have the work. They send you back to the hall, and if there's a lot of guys out of work, you can't jump the list. You got to wait your turn to go back to work.
All right. Well, I don't know what the answer is. I don't know how we compete globally. It just seems to me that the jobs that were here, we talked about the loss of 3 million manufacturing jobs, and we talk about the loss of construction work, and every year that the contract is up at Kelly Springfield, they threaten to leave. Yeah. If it wasn't for the state of North Carolina giving them millions of dollars to stay, to save something like 1,400 jobs, I believe.
Yeah.
I've spoken to some of those workers. Some of those workers have been my patients. And,
Yeah.
the people that are old school, the ones that have worked there for 25 years and are now retired, they will tell you that it was at one point a great, great position and they really enjoyed working there. They said over the last couple of years that they think things had changed, that, the unions have not been as strong and the benefits weren't there. And
Right.
they used to be bonused on the amount of production and,
Right.
And they were hard workers. I mean, I've spoken
Yeah.
to a few men that worked there for 30 years and they worked their tails off
Yeah.
and they were proud of it. And that's the
Yeah.
important thing. They were proud of their work. They
Absolutely.
were proud of what they did.
Absolutely.
And they were proud of it, and they had a decent salary and a decent pay. And I think that that's the crux of our problem in this country. The crux of our problem is production has gone out the door. It doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So the American worker is not even given the opportunity to produce anything.
Right.
I mean, the steel industry is in China. The manufacturing industry is in Bangladesh. And it's in India, and it's in South America and Central America. The auto industry is, just always barely alive, trying to compete with the Japanese products and the German products and the Korean products. And when you go and you travel, you don't see American cars all over the place. Whenever I'm in South America or Central America or traveling in the Caribbean, you don't see American cars. You see German and you
Toyota.
see Japanese
Yeah,
vehicles. And I'm always scratching my head going, why aren't we selling Fords in China?
Yeah.
Right? There's 1 billion people. Why aren't they driving Fords?
Yeah.
So what's going on here?
Yeah.
What kind of deals are we making in this country for the American worker? Is anybody looking out for the American worker's interest in this country?
Well, that's a good thing about the union too, is when you get a job, again, I say Target. If the union contractor gets the work, he's hiring locally. He's hiring out of that union hall.
Right.
You get a contractor that may be out of state. Who knows who he's hiring? He may be hiring. He has a composite crew that comes with him,
Right.
and they are feeding the economy as far as taking a hotel,
Mhm.
the food to lodge there. But their money's being sent back to Texas, wherever they're coming from.
Right.
When
Yeah.
you're doing the Target and it's a union contractor on that job, you're hiring local families.
Mhm.
And that money stays in that community.
Right. That's
Good.
another good point.
Mhm.
If you drive through Lumberton in Robeson County, you'll see the devastation.
Yeah.
The textile industry that used to be down there is no longer there. My friend used to purchase goods from that area. So what were those workers, were they living high on the hog, sewing and stitching, 10
No.
hours a day, sweatshirts and T-shirts? I mean,
No.
they probably had a decent wage and a decent salary. And unfortunately, we allowed these industries to pack up and leave and go to other countries where they're paying their workers $1 or a nickel a day. I mean, I don't know how you compete with that. I mean, like I said, we've talked about our friend
Well,
who
we
traveled.
can't. That's why the plants are down there instead of here.
Right, but what happens to those workers? Where do they go? They can't
Yeah.
all work at Walmart. I mean,
No.
where do they go? And you're telling me that there's no longer going to be a skilled labor force in this country? We're just all going to be selling, T-shirts and diapers. I mean, where are we headed as far as a nation when when your middle class is shrinking and your industrial business is in the tubes?
There are companies that are doing some growth and expansion, and one of the things they are saying is they want skilled labor to be available to them when they do that. They're looking at areas where skilled labor is available, but there are a variety of factors that go into it. For example, they were looking at North Carolina offered $100 million to Toyota. Well, they're going to Texas, to Dallas, Texas. The reason is their executives have to fly to Japan frequently, and there are no direct flights from RDU to Tokyo, but there are from Dallas, Fort Worth to Tokyo.
Mm-hmm.
So they chose that, even though Texas offered them a $50 million package, and we offered $100 million. So incentives aren't always everything. It has to do with a variety of factors, skilled labor being one of them. But Ron, I was going to tell you, one of the interesting things that happened a couple of years ago when the Democratic National Convention was held in Charlotte, North Carolina.
And they started printing all the flyers.
But the other thing happened was none of the vendors could get a license to operate it unless they were union.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the local folks who lost money on that, try to get them in a union now. Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You bite off your nose, bite your face.
Right.
But I understand why they did it. I understand the statement they were making, and it was a valid statement. But what they could have done was to have brought those people in and say, look what it looks like to work with the union. Come in and work with us and see what it's like and see the benefits of it. And they could have got those folks in.
Well, let's not even talk about union. Let's just talk about the work in general.
Yeah.
I brought my niece out here last year to come visit Dr. T, and I told her, she's in Myrtle Beach going to college at Coastal Carolina. And
great school.
The highway to get out to 95 is 130 to 74. But as we take 130, it's very isolated, but there's homes. You're looking to the left and looking to the right.
Yeah.
Some of the houses are worn down, they're beaten down.
Sure.
And along the way, and there's a lot of homes over there.
Right.
Along the way, there's a couple factories that are abandoned.
Right.
And along that way, there's 2 or 3 gas stations.
Mm-hmm.
So I told her, I said, where are these poor people going to work? they all can't fit into the gas station.
Yeah.
So if you start small, you find a company that wants to start small, manufacturing.
Right.
That 130 is just a prime example where you could find labor. You train them, they become skilled labor. Not even if they're union, just get them jobs.
Right.
And there's plenty of land out there.
Right.
Well, I always go
There is,
back
yeah.
to the story. When you think about the technology and the amount of money that we put into R&D in this country, not only that, but on a federal level. Okay, the research is done on a federal level, in
Right.
grants and everything else. We produce great products in this country. But I mean, great technology, but the production of those products are not here. I talk about the Nike sneaker. I just was passing through the mall a couple of mornings ago, early morning. There was a line around the mall and winding outside. I said, what's going on here? And I went into the Foot Locker. I said, what's going on today? Oh, they're reissuing the Michael Jordan sneaker. I said, what, really? They're reissuing? That's what the line is for? I thought they were, hiring people. I thought, maybe they were taking job applicants. No, it's $330. Make that product down in Lumberton. We can't make it in Robeson County. We can't make it in we can't make it in Cumberland County. Are you telling me that we can't make these products in this
Sure
country? The problem is, how big does the profit margin have to be? Now, the government used to protect the union workers because the government was concerned about the rights of workers. The government was not only concerned about the rights of workers in this country. We were concerned about the rights of workers in the world. We would not trade with China because of the way they treated their people, the human right violations. Okay, and somewhere along the line, someone sold their soul. And you can run over a worker in China with a tank, and we're still going to trade with you.
Mm-hmm.
Tiananmen Square, if I have to mention that.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that we allowed other countries to employ slave labor and become our trade partners, we worked in reverse.
Right.
How the politicians thought this would be good for America is insane, because all it did was allow our businessmen and our corporations to ship jobs overseas. Now, you could say, well, a TV, you can buy a beautiful 60-inch screen TV for, $200 on sale. Whoop-de-doo. If you can't make a decent living because the only job that you can find is working at Walmart by day and CVS by night. And your wife has to work at Eckerd's by day, and she has to work on the weekends at Joe's Crab Shack house or something.
Yeah.
And then there's no health insurance, there's no pension, there's no funds. The kids are in daycare, there's nobody taking care of the children, and we wonder why families are falling apart. So who do you thank for this wonderful situation that we're in? You have to thank the leaders of this country that decided that free trade, 1,000 points of light, a world domination and world trade was a good thing for this country. It is, if it's resulting in Americans producing more products to ship overseas. But like I just explained to you, we're not shipping things to China. I mean,
except gasoline.
Right? What are we shipping? We're shipping our resources.
Gasoline.
Right? We're shipping our resources instead of, and we're not. And in addition to that, we're helping the rest of the world, and we're protecting the rest of the world.
Right.
Like I said to you, just the little sidebar over in the Middle East. I tell you what, our great trade partners, China, let them send 2 million Chinese into the Middle East to calm down this nonsense.
Yeah.
Don't send the American soldier in there to die. Send 1 billion Chinese in there. Send 5 million Chinese in there, and let them guard the forts, and let them guard the plants, and let them guard the infrastructure there. I guarantee you the Chinese will put a cap on the nonsense in the Middle East. Okay? So if they are a true trade partner, if they're our true friend, let's have them help us support the Middle East. But here we are, treasure blood, sweat, and tears as our economy continues to dwindle, and 35 million Americans are not working in this country, and we're protecting the world from the tyranny and from the nonsense of terrorism. Right. And China's our great trade partner. China's our great trade partner. Boy, if this was a relationship, this would be 90-10.
Yeah.
I mean, what kind of relationship works 90-10? Can you have a 90-10 relationship with your wife? 90% of it's your way and 10% of it's her way. Where else does this work? Does this work in the church? Does this work in the union hall?
Works nowhere.
It works nowhere. But our situation with trade in this country is totally imbalanced.
It's win-lose, and we lost.
And we are losing.
Yeah.
And somebody's got to speak up for the American workers in this country, because the middle class is shrinking, and the who's who is running off with great wealth in this country. Look, when Nike sells a sneaker for $300, and it costs a nickel to make in China, that's a bazillion profit that's going into the pockets of Nike. That's not going into the pockets of the American people. You know, we want free trade, yes, but we want to be able to produce something in this country and have a fair agreement with other countries, a fair arrangement so that the American worker has a decent shot.
I saw on the news yesterday, Dr. T, that the Economic Council advisors to the president have said that in the last 6 years, as much as they hate to have to say it, the rich have gotten richer and the poor have gotten poorer in this
Absolutely.
country.
What's going to happen?
Even they're admitting that the things we've done have not really fixed the problem.
Right.
The TARP thing and all the things that have been done.
Well, look,
packages
just
haven't really done it.
Just look at that situation where corporations are allowed to incorporate overseas in Ireland.
Yes.
That is a sham. I mean, for corporations to have a little a box in Ireland and claim that they're incorporated overseas
to avoid the corporate tax here.
That is insane.
We can lower the corporate tax rate in the United States and they'll stay here.
Burger King bought a Canadian coffee company
for that reason.
Yeah, now they're going to be headquartered.
It's 13% up there.
And you're out there
like 20-something.
And today you're out there driving a truck, you know, paying your taxes, paying your way. God forbid you miss, a payment on your insurance. God forbid you miss your health payment. You're out there busting your behind in this country, and you've got these corporations that are overseas incorporated in Ireland just to avoid the American taxes. It's insane. They say it's almost $50 billion in lost revenue per quarter.
Yeah.
That's nuts that we could allow that. How come the elected officials in this country aren't putting a kibosh to that immediately? You're telling me we can't get Congress to vote on that immediately? I guarantee you put 300 Americans in Congress that are working Americans in this country, they'll put the kibosh on that immediately. Yep. That'll be at the top of the agenda. So honestly, it goes back to horrible leadership. And I know I say this, I know I'm a broken record, but if I can convince you of one thing listening to this microphone is both parties are in bed with big business. And it's a shame because the American workers are taking it on the chin. And I don't know what recourse we have. When you have 10% unions in this country, I hate to tell you this, Ron, but I think unions are dead. I mean, I know you probably feel differently, but I don't know how else we turn it around.
And all of a sudden, you're going to have a much larger gap between the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer.
Absolutely.
What do you think?
You need some kind of representation.
I just wanted to end by sharing a story that's sort of a parable of this. On a cold January morning in 2007, in one of the metro stations in Washington, D.C., a man sat down with a violin and played 6 Bach pieces. He played for 45 minutes. During that time, about 2,000 people walked through the station. Sometimes people would slow down. Occasionally, they'd throw $1 in his hat. Even the children who wanted to stop and listen were pushed by their parents to hurry up and move. This lasted for about 1 hour. He collected $32. No one knew this, but that violinist was Joshua Bell, one of the greatest musicians in the world. He was playing some of the most intricate music ever written on a violin worth $3.5 million. 2 days before Joshua Bell sat down in that metro station, he performed in a sold-out Boston theater where seats averaged $100 apiece to sit and listen to the man play. He was incognito in that metro station, and it was organized by the Washington Post as part of a social experiment about perception, taste, and people's priorities. It raised some questions. How do we perceive beauty? What do we pass by every day and not realize we just missed it? What do we really appreciate? And can we recognize talent? Same thing's true. What are we missing by not seeing the value of unions for the American worker and what's happening in this country? I think we're like these people. We're in such a hurry. We're moving all the time. We're not paying attention to what's around us.
And too often we're led like sheep to slaughter.
Exactly right.
And we've got to start speaking out. I mean, we need more shepherds letting us know that, hey, man, this has got to change. We've got to demand change from both parties. We have to demand more from our elected officials because they're just letting this country go right down the tubes. Another Tuesday has gone by. I want to thank our special guest, Ron Floor, union worker, electrical union worker, and his father, you heard, worked 40 years in the unions and did some good things. And we'll hopefully to continue this discussion about union workers. I'm Dr. Nelson. Yesterday's a canceled check.
Tomorrow's a promissory note, Dr. T.
Hey, today's the only time we have, so spend it wisely. God bless you. Get out there. Keep pushing. Keep pumping. Keep rocking in the free world. I'm Dr. Nelson. We'll be back with you next Tuesday. God bless.